Welcome. You are about to witness one of the greatest turning points in human history, the domestication of fire. Once a gift of lightning, volcanoes, or parched grasslands, fire was both a source of terror and wonder for early humans. Yet one day, this wild element ceased to be a danger to avoid and became a companion to master. In that moment, an entirely new era began for humankind. The domestication of fire was not merely about illuminating darkness or escaping the cold. It transformed food, shaped metals, brought communities together, and laid the very foundations of civilization. Today, as we live in modern cities, it may seem ordinary, but without fire, the course of human history would have been entirely different. The first encounter with fire, from natural disasters to primal fear, fire, the very force that warms our homes, cooks our meals, and fuels our technology, was once nothing but a mystery to humankind. The first contact with this miracle occurred entirely beyond human control, in nature's most furious moments. After a storm, a single bolt of lightning could ignite dry grass, turning forest into vast, uncontrollable infernos. For the humans of thousands of years ago, such events were more than disasters. They were pure encounters with the unknown. The early humans trembled before the roaring sound of burning trees, the red light that pierced the darkness, and the sharp scent of smoke hanging in the air. They had no knowledge to explain these forces of nature. Thus, fire was seen as something supernatural, sometimes an angry god, sometimes a punishing spirit. Before this blazing mystery, humanity could only watch, flee, and hide. The first encounter with fire was not an invention, it was a surrender. Yet within that fear, curiosity was born. Because fire was not only destructive. On a cold night, the warmth radiating from burning wood made survival just a little easier. Animals avoided the glow, and that safety was noticed. Perhaps, by chance, the carcass of an animal had touched the flames, and the scent rising with the smoke sparked a question. Why does this meat smell different? Fire was beginning to shift, from a natural phenomenon to a tool that could make life better. And here, a turning point in human history began. Observations emerged. Fire could not cross water. Wind could either feed it or extinguish it. Wet wood refused to burn, but dry twigs caught fire from the smallest spark. Through these discoveries, humans began to learn. This knowledge did not come from written culture, but from memory, observation, and experience. And most importantly, fire was no longer just an encounter. It had become a goal. During this period, people began to stay longer in burned areas. Communities gathered around charred logs, feeling safer through the night beside the flames. Perhaps this was the moment when the first communal fires were born. The circle formed around the fire in the darkness became humanity's first ring of safety, its first social home. Fire was igniting not only warmth, but a sociological revolution. Yet still, there was no control. Humans did not create fire. They merely found it, tried to use it, and watched it fade away. Fire was not yet domesticated. It was still free. And in that freedom lay both hope and danger. This era marks humanity's attempt to understand fire. Consciousness and observation reached a new leap. People no longer gazed at the sky only in awe, but in curiosity. How does lightning set trees ablaze? Where does this spark come from? Could I, too, create such fire? The answers were not yet found, but the direction was clear: from watching to creating. And from this moment onward, humankind began its pursuit to transform fire from a force found in nature into a power born from its own hands. A quest that would test the limits of intelligence and forever change the future of the world. In pursuit of the spark, learning to create fire. Observing fire was easy, but creating it? That was one of the greatest and most transformative challenges in human history. For the first humans who watched lightning strike the earth, volcanoes erupt, and forests burn, fire was for a long time merely a natural event, uncontrollable, fearsome, perhaps even divine. But one day, though we will never know exactly where or when, a human produced a spark with their own hands. Maybe it was the clash of two stones, maybe the friction of a stick against dry wood. In that moment, not only a spark was born, a new age in human history began. It was the birth of a being no longer resigned to endure nature, but one who could understand it, imitate it, and even transform it. To make fire might seem like a simple physical act, yet behind it lay a profound leap of thought. Humanity learned to connect cause and effect, to observe, to test, to fail, and to try again. It was one of the earliest examples of thinking turned into practice. To notice that striking stones could produce a spark that ignites dry moss. To identify which branches burn best. To use the direction of the wind to feed the flame. All of this required systematic observation and experience. This was the moment when learning began not only for survival, but for progress. Learning to make fire was not merely a technical achievement, it was also a social and cultural turning point. The knowledge of how to create fire was not an individual possession, but a communal treasure. The one who could make fire provided not only warmth or cooked food, but knowledge. They were the bearer of wisdom, the guardian of a sacred skill. In many early societies, the act of making fire was considered divine. Those who mastered it ceased to be ordinary. They became leaders, sages, symbols of power. Over time, the ways of producing sparks multiplied. Flint stones struck together to release tiny embers. Friction between wooden rods to ignite dry grass. Or sunlight concentrated through polished stones onto tinder. The methods varied by geography, but the goal was the same: to capture the force of nature in a single flame. That flame soon became the center of human life. Fire was no longer a mere tool. It was a cornerstone of culture. People painted cave walls under its glow. Communities gathered around it on dark nights. They shared stories, passed down knowledge, performed rituals. The fire's circle became the heart of human connection, a space not just for warmth, but for togetherness. And perhaps most importantly, mastering fire gave humans their first true sense of control over nature. When night fell, there was no longer only fear. There was warmth, light, safety, food, all born from a spark. Humanity's relationship with nature changed forever. For the first time, it was not one-sided. Humans became not only creatures of nature, but its negotiators, its shapers, its tamers. That is why learning to make fire is more than a story of invention. It is a philosophical milestone. It marks the very beginning of the long journey that would take us from caves to city-states, and from there to the stars. The light in the caves, fire, and the birth of social life. The ability to create fire was not merely a technical breakthrough, it was a revolution that reshaped the very fabric of human social life. Fire was no longer just a natural phenomenon. It became the heart of the living space. And that central position transformed human communities from the ground up. For early humans struggling to survive in caves or temporary shelters, the night was one of the greatest threats. Daylight provided enough time to hunt, gather, and move. But once the sun set, darkness brought fear. For predators, the night marked the beginning of the hunt. For humans, it was a time of helplessness. At that crucial moment, fire emerged as both a physical and psychological shield. Fire drew a boundary in the midst of the night. Its light defined a safe zone, while its smoke and warmth kept wild animals at bay. Yet its impact reached deeper than mere protection from danger. It calmed the fears that came from within. Around its glow, people began to gather, to share, to speak. To sit by the fire was not just to stay warm, it was to socialize. Many anthropologists believe that the earliest myths, oral stories, and narratives were born around a campfire. Fire encouraged conversation, and conversation built community. Sharing thoughts aloud nurtured language, and the growth of language sparked cultural evolution itself. Thanks to fire, human activity was no longer bound by the setting sun. Work could continue into the night. Watch duties could be organized, tasks could be divided among members. This shift gradually led to more structured societies, hierarchies, leadership roles, and defined responsibilities within the group. Fire also became a symbol of belonging. Every group had its own flame. To possess fire was to possess life. Carrying it from one place to another, or keeping it burning, became a sign of continuity and strength. Maintaining the flame was more than a survival act. It was a ritual of persistence. Feeding the fire meant feeding life itself. And then there were the children, growing up by the firelight, watching, learning, and participating. The fire became a classroom. Who would cook? Who would gather wood? Who would tell the story? These simple roles laid the foundation of organized life, the earliest training for cooperation, memory, and responsibility. In short, fire was not only warmth, it was unity, memory, language, and society itself. In the light of the flames, for the first time, humans met each other's gaze. They laughed together, feared together, thought together. And from that day on, at the heart of every civilization, a hearth continued to burn. The transformative power of fire, cooking, nutrition, and evolution. The domestication of fire did more than bring safety or social unity. It reshaped our very biology. Its deepest influence can be traced in the way we eat. For fire did not only warm us, it transformed us. It cooked our food, and in doing so, cooked us into what we would become. Cooking changed the chemistry of what we consumed. Compared to raw foods, cooked meals were far easier to chew and digest, and their nutrients became more accessible to the body. This meant greater energy efficiency. Humans could now obtain more energy from less food. That surplus energy played a crucial role in the development of the human brain. The brain is a demanding organ. Though it accounts for only about 2% of body weight, it consumes nearly 20% of the body's energy at rest. Without cooking, such an energy-hungry brain could not have evolved. Cooked food made possible the growth of this extraordinary organ, the center of reason, creativity, and memory. Fire also brought a new layer of protection through cooking. Harmful bacteria and parasites were destroyed by heat, reducing the risk of disease and improving survival rates. With this, humans could safely consume a wider variety of foods and even preserve what nature offered for later use. Cooking also changed how time was spent. No longer did people need to spend hours chewing and digesting tough raw meat. Freed from that burden, they could now dedicate time to crafting tools, organizing their groups, and telling stories. Activities that accelerated cultural evolution. Moreover, the act of cooking itself introduced social structure. Who would prepare the meal? Who would serve it? Who would divide the portions? Such questions gave rise to the first examples of division of labor, small steps that, over time, laid the groundwork for broader social and gender roles. Fire did not only cook meat, it softened roots, roasted grains, cracked nuts, and eventually boiled water in early pottery. Humanity's relationship with the environment was permanently altered. We were no longer mere gatherers, but transformers of nature. And in the glow of that fire, the first shared meals became rituals of unity. The concept of a communal meal, the precursor of the modern table, was born. Even today, eating remains more than sustenance. It is a social act, a bond, a conversation. Its roots trace back to that first moment when food met flame. In the end, the power of fire to cook did not just change what we ate, it changed who we are. It shaped our bodies, our societies, our cultures. That is why fire stands not merely as a tool, but as one of the greatest catalysts in human history. The language of fire, rituals, beliefs, and mythologies. The role of fire in human history was never confined to physical survival. Its warmth, its light, its fierce consuming power, these did not merely shape our bodies, but reached into our souls. Humanity saw in fire not only a tool, but a meaning, a symbol, a sacred presence. And so, in nearly every ancient civilization, fire stood at the heart of myth, faith, and ritual. The smoke rising skyward became, for many, a messenger to the divine. The crackling of burning wood carried the weight of prayer. People turned to fire to reach their gods, to drive away evil spirits, to restore harmony with nature. Through this, fire ceased to be a mere phenomenon of the physical world. It became a bridge between the earthly and the divine. To the ancient Persians, fire was the essence of purity. In Zoroastrian belief, it burned eternally within temples, watched day and night so it would never die out. For if the sacred flame were extinguished, the bond with Ahura Mazda would be broken. Similarly, in India, the god Agni, the divine embodiment of fire, was among the most revered in the Vedas. Sacrifices were made to Agni, and prayers ascended to the heavens through his flames. In Greek mythology, the Titan Prometheus stole fire from the gods to give it to humanity. It was more than a tale of invention. It was an act of rebellion. Fire symbolized forbidden knowledge, power so immense that it defied the divine order. Prometheus's punishment, eternal torment, stands as a reminder of fire's dual nature, creation and destruction, gift and curse. Yet, through this act, humanity was forever changed. The darkness was broken. In Roman homes, the goddess Vesta presided over the hearth. Her sacred fire was both protector of the household and a symbol of the unity of Rome itself. The unbroken flame represented continuity, the living spirit of the people. Across the ancient Middle East, prayers whispered beside the hearth sought blessing, health, and abundance, keeping alive the belief that the flame was a bearer of fortune. Fire also marked the most sacred transitions of life: birth, marriage, death. A candle was lit for a newborn. Couples circled the fire to seal their union. The dead were sent off in its light. Fire could signify both beginning and end, purification, renewal, enlightenment, and release, all contained within its glowing heart. In many shamanic traditions, fire was believed to speak. The dance of its flames, the drift of its smoke, the rhythm of its crackles, all were messages from the unseen world. Shamans would sit before the fire, before entering trance, seeking connection with the energies of nature through its warmth and motion. Fire was a guide, a portal, a companion on spiritual journeys. Its symbolism later took tangible form in places of worship. The eternal candles in cathedrals, the oil lamps in mosques, the incense flames in Buddhist temples, all carried forward the sanctity of fire as an unending light. Even today, torches in remembrance ceremonies or candles lit for the dead are echoes of this timeless reverence. Ultimately, fire is not merely a physical element. It is a metaphysical one. It speaks through smoke, guides with its light, blesses with its warmth, and cleanses through its flame. Fire has not only warmed humanity's hands, it has illuminated its spirit. The story of fire, therefore, is also the story of belief and of our eternal search for meaning. The spark of technology. When fire met metal. Among all of humanity's encounters with fire, few were as revolutionary as its meeting with metal. Metals, rare in nature and difficult to shape, were transformed by the heat of fire into something malleable, something human hands could command. This moment marked a turning point, the transition from a fragile creature bound by nature to a being capable of reshaping it. It began with copper. Those shimmering stones under the sun, once thought lifeless, revealed their secret under fire's heat. When melted, they could be molded, sharpened, reborn. Soon, humans discovered that mixing copper with tin produced something even stronger: bronze. Thus began the Bronze Age, a time when tools and weapons outlasted stone, when fields were tilled more efficiently, and battles were fought with new precision. Fire was no longer merely for warmth or food. It had become the engine of progress. Then came iron, the metal that closed one age and opened another. The Iron Age transformed not only materials, but societies themselves. Under the 1,000-degree breath of fire, iron yielded to the hammer's will, becoming plow, sword, axe, and hammer. These were not mere objects. They were extensions of human will, instruments of civilization. The rhythmic song of the blacksmith's forge became the anthem of rising empires. Fire's mastery over metal did more than create tools. It gave birth to craftsmanship, specialization, and trade. Humanity was no longer only surviving. It was producing, transforming, exchanging. Mines emerged, workshops multiplied, and the social bond of master and apprentice was born, the earliest form of organized technical education. In time, gold and silver joined the story. These precious metals, shaped by fire's precision, became not only ornaments, but symbols of value. The first coins, small discs stamped and forged by heat, revolutionized exchange, giving birth to the concept of economy itself. In a sense, the money we carry today is a distant descendant of that ancient flame. With the Industrial Revolution, the union of fire and metal reached unimaginable heights. Steam engines, iron rails, steel structures, all were the children of that elemental bond. Now, fire was no longer shaping only metals. It was reshaping the entire world. Even today, the legacy of that spark endures. Foundries, furnaces, and laser-cutting technologies still echo the same principle: transforming matter through controlled heat. Every modern invention owes something to that first flicker that leapt from stone to ore. In the end, the meeting of fire and metal was not merely a technical revolution. It was a declaration of mastery. a moment when humanity seized its destiny from nature's hands. And that power, that spark, remains the oldest flame behind every technology we use today. The heat of urbanization, from hearth to civilization. Fire was not only humanity's ally in its struggle against nature, it was also the silent architect of social life. What once warmed cave walls would, in time, come to warm entire cities. It became the invisible thread weaving together domestic comfort, urban transformation, and the evolution of civilization itself. At the foundation of the first settled societies, alongside agriculture, stood the controlled use of fire. As humans tied their lives to the land, permanent homes began to rise, and at the center of every home burned a hearth. This was more than a place for cooking. It was a symbol of safety, warmth, and connection. Around it, families gathered, stories were told, decisions were made. The hearth became the heart of human existence. As communities grew and multiplied, individual fires became part of a larger network, the warmth of civilization itself. Domestic architecture evolved, and so did the way fire was housed. Open hearths gave way to stone ovens, and later to enclosed fireplaces. In medieval Europe, grand fireplaces became symbols of wealth and status. The nobility warmed their halls with towering chimneys, while common folk tended modest kitchen flames. Technological progress made fire safer within the home. The invention of chimneys drew smoke outside, improving air quality and enabling denser urban living. This was a quiet revolution, one that allowed cities to expand without suffocating in their own smoke. Fire, once a personal necessity, had become a shared civic asset. Heating systems soon followed this evolution. The invention of the stove, fueled by wood and coal, transformed winter life in growing towns. Later, centralized heating distributed warmth through pipes, allowing a single fire to serve an entire building. Fire became an unseen presence, no longer visible, yet always felt, a source of comfort hidden behind walls and metal grates. Ovens, too, gained symbolic power. Neighborhood bakeries were not just places to bake bread. They were centers of community, conversation, and continuity. Every household had its own hearth, but bread was often baked collectively, a ritual that bound people together. In this way, fire became the emblem of shared life. In modern cities, gas stoves, boilers, and electric heaters are the safe, miniature descendants of the ancient flame. Though we rarely see the fire itself, its presence lingers. In the steaming pot on the stove, the warmth of a radiator, the glow of a heated room. These are echoes of a domesticated force that once danced wildly in the dark. At the core of this transformation lies civilization itself. The more humanity learned to control fire, the more it learned to build cities. And as cities grew, so too did our mastery of fire. What once flickered atop a stone in a cave now circulates silently through skyscrapers. The story of fire and urban life, then, is not merely one of technology. It is the story of how humanity learned not only to survive, but to live together, to gather, to build, to create warmth in both stone and spirit. The power and peril of fire. The price of control. Fire stands as one of humanity's greatest triumphs, and one of its most devastating burdens. It is both the foundation of civilization and the shadow that has threatened to consume it. With its help, cities were built, homes were warmed, and progress ignited. Yet that same fire has reduced those very cities to ashes, taking with it lives, cultures, and centuries of human achievement. When early humans first learned to command fire, they realized it was more than light and warmth. It was a weapon, a defense against predators, a guide in the night. But that same force, when unleashed, became an enemy. A single spark could engulf an entire forest. One ember could destroy a village. As humanity settled into permanent dwellings, the danger became ever more tangible. History bears the scars of fire's fury. The Great Fire of Rome in the year 64 swept through the city for days, forever entwining Emperor Nero's name with myth and suspicion. The Great Fire of London in 1666 devoured over 13,000 homes in just a few days, erasing nearly the entire medieval city. And in 1871, the Chicago Fire marked one of America's most catastrophic urban disasters, striking at the very heart of its industrial age. Each of these infernos revealed the same truth. The force that builds can just as easily destroy. In warfare, fire became not a random hazard, but a deliberate weapon. In antiquity, burning projectiles and flaming oils rained down on besieged cities. The Byzantine Greek fire, a weapon that could burn even on water, became a symbol of unstoppable destruction. In the modern era, humanity's mastery of combustion turned into something monstrous. Incendiary bombs, napalm, and white phosphorus devastated entire populations. The fires that followed the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were not merely natural consequences, they were man-made infernos, glimpses of an apocalypse of our own creation. These tragedies forced humanity to confront fire's power with discipline and design. The earliest firefighting efforts relied on buckets and wells, but the industrial age brought mechanical pumps, alarms, and organized fire brigades. By the 20th century, urban planning itself evolved around fire safety, with escape routes, resistant materials, and entire systems dedicated to preventing catastrophe. No longer was fire a primitive threat at the edge of survival. It had become a defining concern of modern civilization. Yet even today, fire continues to remind us of its untamed essence. Wildfires rage across continents. Homes are lost to electrical sparks. Factories reduced to smoldering ruins. Climate change has only heightened these dangers. Rising temperatures turn landscapes into tinder, and a single lightning strike can ignite devastation on a continental scale. Ultimately, fire remains humanity's greatest paradox. It is our most faithful servant and our most unforgiving master. Every comfort it grants carries the echo of a warning. Neglect it, and it will turn against you. Fire builds civilizations. It also buries them. It is both the flame that lights our way and the ash that marks our limits. The story of fire, humanity's rebirth from the ashes. The story of fire is not merely the tale of a flame rising. It is the chronicle of humanity being reborn within its glow. In every spark lies an invention. In every ash, a lesson. Fire is the thread that binds survival to civilization, instinct to intellect, and darkness to enlightenment. With fire, humankind expanded its dominion over nature. It learned to banish the cold, cook its food, forge its metals, harden its pottery, and illuminate the night. Each of these acts represented not just technical mastery, but a profound cultural awakening. Around the hearth, humans gathered to share warmth, to tell stories, to define laws, to dream. The hearth became the first parliament, the first school, the first stage of civilization. In its glow, humanity discovered not only light, but also community. As fire entered the heart of production, it reshaped the course of history. With the forging of iron came tools, weapons, and architecture, each a manifestation of the human will to transform the world. Fire gave humanity strength, but also the burden of power, for in wielding it, humans became creators and destroyers alike. In mythology, fire is often portrayed as a stolen gift, a symbol of both enlightenment and defiance. When Prometheus brought fire to humankind, he defied the gods, gifting mortals the power of creation and with it, the curse of consequence. This eternal duality remains at the center of fire's symbolism, wisdom and punishment, progress and peril. In the modern age, fire still fuels our world, even when it hides behind the hum of machines and the flow of electricity. It powers our cities, our industries, our very way of life. From burning coal to splitting atoms, humanity continues to harness its essence, transforming visible flame into invisible energy. Yet the principle remains the same. To command fire is to command transformation, and with it, responsibility. Today, we understand fire in ways our ancestors could not. We engineer safety systems, pursue renewable energy, and strive to live in balance with the forces we once feared. But the lesson endures. Fire is not simply something to be used. It is something to be understood, respected, and lived alongside. For as long as humanity exists, the flame will remain both a warning and a promise. It is the memory of our beginnings and the light guiding us toward what we might yet become. In the end, fire is not merely an invention. It is the mirror of humanity itself. With it, we stepped out of caves, built our cities, forged our industries, and reached the stars. Yet, at every turning point, it reminded us of a single truth. Power without wisdom leads not to progress, but to ruin. That is why the story of fire is, in essence, the story of us, a tale of light and shadow, of destruction and rebirth from the ashes. The journey of fire does not only recount our past, it illuminates our future. From the first spark that lit the walls of a cave to the engines that drive the wheels of industry, to the rockets that blaze across the cosmos, fire has always been humanity's invisible companion, shaping our destiny in silence. But fire is more than a tool. It is a reflection. Humanity's story has always followed the path of its flame, sometimes radiant, sometimes scorched. And now we understand. The true challenge is not to control fire, but to coexist with it in wisdom. For the real power of humankind lies not in the flame itself, but in our ability to comprehend it, transform it, and rise once more from its ashes.